Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 159 based on novel. So let's start. The already out of strength and almost dead Caia suddenly pushed her own body up alongside Long Houchent in a surge, making a movement close to a pouncing carp. In the midst of this pounce, a right hand finally dug into that gate of light, but this had just exhausted all her remaining potential. While stretching her hand in front of the gate of light, Kia's eyes opened wide, already devoid of light. At the same time her right hand came into contact with the gate, that gate abruptly shone brightly, enveloping both Kia and Long Houchent, who disappeared inside in a _swish_. As Kia and Long Houchent disappeared, all the steps in view of bright glimmer of hope disappeared as well. Space twisted and refracted, and the next instant, the 6th floor regained its original appearance, the only difference being that Kia and Long Houchent weren't there anymore. Kia's miserable condition and hysterical state were causing everyone to violently gasp for breath, with only one line of thought in them, Kia succeeded, The bright light kept curling up, bringing Long Houchent and Kia into a gold-colored world, filled with inexhaustible golden rays. Tiny traces of blood bleached and dyed the air, and dots of bright light circulated all around Kia's body, making their way inside. Even the blood on her lapel drifted back due to that bright light, slowly returning back inside her body. Kia's right arm was still stretched forward, with Long Houchent tightly under its embrace as if she was afraid of dropping his body off. The injuries on Kia's body recovered slowly, and all imperfect parts scattered to all direction, disappearing. Only her torn long skirt wasn't restored. The look on her face was still determined, even if it had lost all light. In the golden world, following a deep long sigh, an aged voice sounded out, "Was it really worth it?" The golden light vanished gradually, and Kia, who had carried Long Houchent on her back, landed lying on the ground. She seemed to be dreaming about the time the two of them had reunited back in Holy City for the demon hunt competition. They were holding hands, and walking alongside that road to the inn. That road seemed to suddenly become endless. No matter how long they walked, they did not reach the inn. But they didn't get fidgety at all, instead enjoying the warmth of each other's hand. The sounds of the cane in her hand tapping onto the ground kept reverberating in Kia's world. Every time she turned back to look at Long Houchent, she would catch sight of that extremely loving and warm smile. Their lives were melting together at once. All the pain seemed to be forgotten like that, forever and ever. But a lot of things frequently turn out differently from one's wishes. The road in front turned illusory, and the next instant, the surroundings all became golden. Kia was quite panicked, tightly gripping Long Houchent's hand and shouting loudly, "Houchent! Houchent!" The awakened Kia suddenly sat up, immediately catching sight of Long Houchent's pale hands wrapped around her chest, and she immediately gripped them tightly. Her body was really no longer feeling any pain, and even all her internal and external spiritual energy had come back. Quite a few memories of the harsh pain she had previously experienced had remained. The hem of her skirt was still tattered since long ago, and she was unaware that her body was shaking greatly. Remembering everything she just did, Kia raised her head to look around. This should be the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, right? As far as the eye could see, everything was gold-colored. Compared to the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity, this place was far smaller in volume. The circular hall made up a diameter of roughly 30 meters. This was a dome, surrounded by a total of 20 golden pillars. The surface, dome, and surrounding pillars all contained countless golden magic-infused runes. The ground of the hall formed a huge golden hexagram, from which a thin golden fog arose. At the center of the hexagram stood a huge coffin. 5 meters long and 3 meters wide, this coffin was embedded with various precious gems, and not only gems but also magical beasts, magic crystals, and human spiritual pellets, none of which was below the 9th step. So was this the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, eternal dwelling place of the holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux? Kia stood up impatiently. After spending so much effort to come here, she was in the midst of getting her one and only chance to resurrect Long Houchent. But where was Elux? Was it really worth it? An aged voice suddenly reverberated in her head. Kia unconsciously stepped back, staring at that huge coffin in front of her. A white fog slowly ascended from the top of that coffin and in the sky surrounding it. Very rapidly, this white fog turned into a human shape, looking the same as all the previous sculptures. It just didn't have a lower body, which was just replaced by fog linked together with that golden coffin. An aged face, extremely emotional looking, had a gentle look directed at Kia. Letting out a light sigh, he asked once again, "Was it really worth it?" "It's worth it. You're the slumbering calamity, Elux? Kia asked with determination. Elux nodded and responded, I am indeed the holy necromancer and slumbering calamity, Elux. Was it really worth it? Kia wrinkled her eyebrows. Of course it's worth it. Elux let out a deep sigh. What a good girl. I didn't think that you would finally manage to complete all the trials I have set up in those years. You should know that the most unacceptable attribute in my eyes is your purifying attribute, so there's almost no way you should be able to inherit my legacy. Hearing him, Kia immediately became greatly alarmed. She didn't mind the inheritance at all, but this was pertaining to the matter of whether she would be able to resurrect Long Houchen. If the power from Elux's legacy couldn't be borrowed, wouldn't all her efforts just come to naught? I am willing to inherit your power. You left the message that as long as one can attain this 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, they could receive your legacy. Don't tell me these words didn't count? Kia stubbornly stated. Elux showed a faint smile. I have never heard anyone address this tone of speech to me in my living years. And yet you want to inherit my power. Kia became sluggish, slowly kneeling in front of Elux and bowing down to him. Sorry, teacher. I was in the wrong. I hope I can inherit your power. You must have a way, right? Elux's eyes pulsed at once, all for the sake of this child on your back. This one should be my original successor, right? Kia didn't mutter a word, only continuously kowtowing towards Elux, her forehead rapidly turning red and swollen. Elux waved his hand, and immediately, a spurt of golden light came out from the ground, supporting Kia's body. You have already knocked your head on the ground enough. Indeed, I have a way to make you inherit my power. But if you inherit it, your original power of purification will completely dissipate, and your body will even consequently fester, turning you just like a zombie. This power of purification is originally entirely incompatible with my power of necromancy. Are you still willing even if it turns out that way? If you lose your beauty, do you really think that even if the one on your back is resurrected, he would still come to like you? I am willing. Kia replied with no hesitation. Are you not worried? Elux seemed almost unwilling as he asked. Kia shook her head with energy. I am not worried. Then, please begin. Elux took a deep look at Long Houchen, his look turning greatly emotional, causing that body formed of mist to distort slightly. A long time later, he replied quietly, his heart is already destroyed, giving him no more opportunity to live. Although his soul is intact, resurrecting him will be extremely difficult. First of all, he will need a live and fresh throbbing heart. Kia raised her head to look at Elux, undoing the chains on her body, cautiously placing Long Houchen on the ground, laying him on the golden ground. Taking a deep look at him and gently caressing his face already empty of blood, she lowered his head and lightly kissed his forehead. Although this forehead was already devoid of warmth and was ice cold, that still gave her the feeling of a living person. Her cute face displaying a faint smile, Kia slowly stood up, raising her right hand which flashed in black light as the sickle of the god of death appeared in her palm. You are right. Actually, he should be your successor. Please resurrect him. As for the heart. Kia smiled, full of sincerity. This instant, she looked as charming as a myriad of blossoming flowers. Even the holy necromancer Elux, who was already dormant for several thousand years, couldn't help but blank out upon sight of her smile. Please use mine. In a flash of black light, the sickle of the god of death in Kia's hand was flipped back, aiming its sharp blade toward her own chest. She had the absolute confidence of being able to extract her own heart intact and leave it in the spot of his one. This seemed to be a perfect ending. This way she would be able to stay forever at his side, which is why her smile was sincere. She could already feel the cold blade of the sickle pierce through her skin, and in just an instant, a blade would cut through her chest and cautiously extract her heart. Not allowed. Golden splurges of light burst out from below, clashing against the sickle of the god of death, and taking away the massive weapon, although a trace of blood had still appeared amidst Kia's chest. Elux declared in fury, what a girl! Is he really worth you doing such a thing for him? Don't you know that this purifying blade has soul-purifying properties? Even if you are the one using it on yourself, in case your vitals are pierced by it, an inevitable death will follow. No force will ever be able to bring you back to life. Kia looked at Long Houchen with deep emotion. So what, with my heart being together with him, having him resurrect is already enough for me. I am willing to die for his sake. Don't tell me you have another heart at disposal here aside from mine. All I am asking is for him to be resurrected. Elux became silent, his eyes showing struggles, but right now, Kia, whose attention was focused onto Long Houchen, just didn't notice it. If only that girl I had met at those times was like you, maybe none of that would have happened. Perhaps I would have just followed her in death. Even if everything ends with death, at least that would be a happy ending. The words that Ilux murmured woke Kia up with a start. Lifting up her head, she insisted, "Please use my heart." Ilux suddenly interrupted her, "Child, don't be hasty. How about it, let's make a bet. If you win, I will help you to resurrect him, but if you lose, just give up on him, and concentrate all your thoughts and efforts in inheriting my power. Although I do not like the purifying attribute on you, I like your character. I am not taking the bet." Kia shook her head vigorously. "There's no way I can take a bet with him as the stake, because I cannot afford to lose." Ilux replied coldly, "Then it cannot be helped for you." This instant, he really had the imposing manner of the holy necromancer Ilux. In a wave of his hand, Kia felt extremely tense all over her body, already out of control of her whole body, and even the sickle of the god of death in her hand was suppressed, returning back into her own body. Pulled by the golden light, she was pulled to Ilux's side. Immediately, the surroundings twisted all around, and everything transformed miraculously, turning illusory, yet substantial. Kia discovered with stupor that she was not only unable to move, but also unable to let out the slightest sound, and was unable to exert the slightest bit of spiritual energy. It seemed that her very soul was frozen. Ilux remained afloat on her side, dispersing layer upon layer of bright light. On Long Houchen's side appeared another Kia, with a hole in her chest and having lost her heart. Immediately, his right hand pointed its forefinger on Long Houchen's body in a touch. Then the wounds on his body healed up at an astounding speed. In the midst of intense fluctuations of golden light, the golden foundation armor on him was removed, and under Kia's emotional watch, Long Houchen's pale skin gradually regained color. All of it was really too miraculous. Ilux just needed a lift of his hand to bring Long Houchen back to life. Ilux's voice resounded in Kia's mind, "I have temporarily simulated the situation where he would be brought back to life. Now guess, what will his reaction be when he learns that your heart was used to resurrect him?" Kia's original feelings of excitement turned instantly. She struggled as much as possible against Ilux's binding, but how could it be so easy to resist in front of this man who was previously known as humankind's disaster, who narrowly caused humanity to go extinct? There was nothing she could do except for looking on helplessly at that instant of resurrection, at Long Houchen in the midst of trembling. So cold, Long Houchen felt as if he was soaked in a pond of ice, shivering with extreme cold. The deathly stillness in his brain gradually rose and fell, and he felt chills in succession, and was roused by the cold. A golden expanse came to his sight, as the intense light essence caused the chills felt by his body to decrease sharply. Where is this? Hell? Subconsciously, Long Houchen placed his hand onto his own chest, finding out astonishingly that the hole in his chest had disappeared, and that he felt an indistinct heartbeat and had the sensation of blood flowing through his body. Only, his powerful cultivation was obliterated completely, and faint waves of weakness assaulted his brain again and again. "Are you awake?" An aged voice drew Long Houchen's attention, who immediately noticed that huge coffin and the soul floating in the sky. "You are? And what's this place?" Long Houchen asked reflexively. Right now, he still felt dizzy, but the ice-cold sensation all over his body subsided gradually, and the thick light essence in the air helped him feel better. The spiritual energy in his body also seemed to slowly recover thanks to absorbing the light essence, and at long last it felt a lot warmer. "This is the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. And I believe that you must know who I am, right?" Ilux asked in a faint voice. Long Houchen became greatly alarmed, and immediately sobered up. "What? This is the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity? But then, just how? How did I get here?" Ilux pointed to his side, and replied calmly, "She's the one who brought you here." Long Houchen followed his finger, and immediately became stagnant. His mouth agape, and eyes staring confusedly, he suddenly found himself unable to let out the slightest sound, as if his body was locked down, remaining motionless. That was Kia. A Kia with a hole in her chest and whose blood was flowing all over the ground. Having lost all vitality, Kia looked as pale as a piece of paper. Kia. Kia. How could my Kia, Long Houchen stayed so stiff for several seconds, totally motionless. Ilux's voice reverberated through his ears. "She has been carrying the eternal melody I have given you, and been shouldering your corpse, going through the challenges in the Tower of Eternity one after another. She said that you were my successor, and that she wanted to bring you back to life. You should clearly know how you died. Having lost your heart, even my magic cannot resurrect you without a live and fresh heart. So she offered her own heart to you. No. Long Houchen looked up to the sky and kneeled down to the ground, throwing himself at Kia and tightly gripping her tight figure, his tears falling beyond control. Kia's corpse was really cold. Long Houchen felt as if the blood flowing in his body froze down this instant. How could you be so stupid? Just how could you be so stupid, Kia? Don't tell me that you believe that I can keep on living by myself with you dead. Suddenly turning back, Long Houchen looked at Elux. Elder, please give her heart back to her. You must have a way to do that, right? Please bring her back to life. Elux coldly responded, do you take this for a game? Do you think that heart transplants can be cycled over and over again? Moreover, even if I was able to do that, you would return to death without a heart. At this point, his voice suddenly warmed up. She is already dead, having offered her heart to resurrect you, and wishing for your heart to be made one with you. This way you won't ever be separated. Don't tell me you don't understand her pain? You are my chosen disciple, who came here to inherit my power. There are plenty more fishes in the sea. With your talent, you will surely be able to find an even better girl than her. And moreover, one can only take revenge by staying alive. If you did not die, she wouldn't have died for the sake of bringing you back to life. You should go look for the culprit of your death, instead of mourning in sadness like a coward. Stand up and accept the holy necromancer Elux's inheritance. At the time you leave from here, you will be the greatest human powerhouse in the world. At that time, everything will come to your grasp. You will be able to get as many girls as you want, and even use the body of your target to pay homage to her. Long Houchen held Kia's body, then turned back toward Elux with an indifferent look, as if convinced by Elux's words his previous state of hysteria disappeared at once, entering a serene state of mind. Holding Kia's corpse, he slowly stood up and muttered irresolutely, if only one of us can live on, it's a good thing that she died first. Elux's eyes diluted in shock, turning back toward the real Kia standing at his side. Long Houchen was unable to see her, but Elux could. His ice-cold voice reverberated in Kia's mind, see, that's the man you were willing to sacrifice your life for. But to Elux's disappointment, Kia seemed to only feel some grief alongside a deep feeling of love, as if she hadn't heard Long Houchen's heartless words at all. Don't you understand? Elux questioned Kia in a slight splurt of fury. Kia lightly shook her head as if she didn't see him. I understand very well. You are the one who doesn't, because you don't understand him at all. Elux let out a cold snort. I don't understand him. He turned back toward the apathetic Long Houchen, and declared, you are right. She died for your success. Are you prepared to inherit my power? Long Houchen shook his head lightly. Inherit your power? What use is there for me to? You are just a slaughterer, a man who clearly is a scion of light, and should have brought light to humanity, yet chose to cause dark slaughters. I don't need to inherit your filthy power. Living on is even more painful than death. If Kia and I could age together, I would definitely strive the hardest to follow after her in death. This way, she could have me accompany her in death, and have me by her side in death. But the event of me dying before her could only make the rest of her life lonely and nothing else. What about strength? What about revenge? None of it matters in my eyes. Perhaps I have a lot more responsibilities, but how can I let Kia keep waiting for me? At this point, his eyes shifted back to his left arm. Sorry that I have disappointed you, divine snail shield of sun and moon. I couldn't bring light to humanity in the end, even if I am the scion of light, and even if I have made the resolve to never let myself get stained by impurity. Even so, I have a weakness that I can never correct. Please let me be unruly once, let me be selfish once. Kia, I am a bit late, but let me join you. Drawing Kia toward him with his left hand, he lowered his head, and offered a deep kiss to her lips while raising his right hand, and condensing the bit of spiritual energy he had just recovered onto his palm, abruptly aimed it at the top of his head. You are not allowed to die? Elux shouted in unreconciliation. His soul materialization instantly appeared in front of Long Houchen and grabbed his hand. Long Houchen raised his head and looked at him coldly. You qualified to stop me. For who knows which reason, Elux's powerful soul force only felt chilly upon Long Houchen's cold gaze, unexpectedly causing him to not even be able to retort back. Go away. Long Houchen shouted in fury, struggling fiercely. Elux grabbed his arms energetically. Don't tell me that there is nothing else you are reluctant to leave behind in this world? Is it really worth it to die just out of a romantic love? Long Houchen smiled in contempt. From what you are saying, you don't understand what love is at all. Love is the most basic thing there is, yet the most intense. Without her, it is like my heart is dead. The other things I am reluctant to leave are just meaningless at that point. This world is already colorless in my eyes, don't stop me in my search for Kia. Do you think that you holding my hand would stop me from causing myself to die? Saying that, Long Houchen's eyes suddenly lit, and one could vaguely see a golden flame instantly flaring up. Bastard, you are crazy. Utterly discomfited, Elux shouted loudly, pointing his finger to the space between Long Houchen's eyebrows. Struck by this finger, Long Houchen struck the 7th floor heavily of the Tower of Eternity. If Elux's reaction was just a bit late, Long Houchen would have been ignited, and at that time, let alone a necromancer, even a god would be unable to bring him back to life. Bouncing back onto the wall, Long Houchen was still hugging Kia tightly, his right arm whirling once again, and aiming at blowing off his own head with no hesitation. Crazy! Elux saw in Long Houchen's eyes an apathetic look like never before. The worst sorrow is not as bad as an uncaring heart, perhaps this was the true meaning behind his look. She is still alive. These simple words were more effective than any attempt to stop him. Long Houchen's right hand stopped on top of his head, lowered to look at Kia, but he still didn't see an ounce of life in her. But right at this time, a sorrowful call came to his ears, Houchen. In Houchen's arms, Kia disappeared into several dots of light, and beside Elux, Kia appeared alive and well, rushing into his embrace, crying loudly. Kia's body was warm, her tears instantly seeping rapidly into Long Houchen's lapel. Her arms were really vigorously, tightly hugging him. Kia! 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 Long Houchen called out her name without pause. He wanted to cry, to let out every tear in his body. Having just regained the most precious thing in his life, he was returning to a state of joy as his soul finally saw a light from a state of deathly stillness. Tightly hugging her, his chin shook and his calls became more and more choking. Seeing the embracing pair, the holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux declared with difficulty, "You two have won. You two have won." These simple words sounded really terrible in Elux's mouth. His soul form floated in a daze, his eyes filled with incomprehension and unbelief. It seemed as his thoughts were shaken to the core, causing his soul to fluctuate in instability, dispersing layer upon layer of white light. Right now, Long Houchen and Kia were completely soaked in the joy of reuniting, and did not take note of any changes in Elux. Kia! Kia! Long Houchen called out her name over and over again. Right now, his feelings of wretched sorrow ended with Kia's appearance, to change into an extreme fear, the fear that this Kia was a fake, which would just shatter his hard-won last hopes. So, he hugged her tightly, as if attempting to absorb her in him, and called her name incessantly. Long Houchen still remembered clearly the instant the demon god emperor pierced through his heart. Darkness approached, but he didn't have any grudge or pain in him, only an inexhaustible reluctance to part with Kia. Darkness had descended gradually. Kia's figure became fuzzy, until the instant that he finally started to fear death. The last thought in his mind was, so I'll never be able to meet with Kia ever again. But right now, he was back to life, and Kia was finally back in front of him. The fire of joy and hope rose in him in an indescribable manner. Hugging her tightly, the fear filling his heart gradually turned into extreme joy. If this was a dream, he hoped to never wake up from it for eternity. If you want to stay together forever, calm down a bit. A warm soul-shaking voice woke up the two of them with shock from this moment of bliss. Long Houchen and Kia turned back their heads at the same time, finally taking notice of the changes in Elux. Elux's condensed soul dispersed some white halations. From his body, a breath of death slowly spread outwards. The pair of eyes on his condensed body seemed far brighter than before, watching them ardently. Long Houchen failed to understand his words, but Kia had a terrible chill. Right, Long Houchen hadn't yet really resurrected. It's just that Elux used extraordinary ways to temporarily bring him to life. She immediately stepped up, filled with hastiness. You just said that we won. Since we won, shouldn't you be helping to resurrect Houchen? Long Houchen was startled, and looked at Kia in incomprehension. Am I not truly all right? What are you saying, Kia? Elux had a faint smile. What a fool you are, kid. Don't tell me you have forgotten everything that has happened before. Although I just used my soul power to make an illusion, it can be considered real in some sense. If I had at that time really accepted letting this girl offer her heart to resurrect you, everything just now would be real. Kia, you, Long Houchen tightly drew Kia closer in his embrace. Why would you do such a foolish thing? If you die, what meaning is there for me to live? Kia buried her head in his chest. At that time Long Houchen was just a corpse, her only thought was that she had to resurrect him. That is why the previous scene shook her greatly, especially Long Houchen's crucial words. Right? If he's resurrected but at the cost of her own life, he'd still choose to die, so wouldn't that make everything up to now meaningless? This instant, the two of them became very calm. Long Houchen seemed to no longer be in a rush to resurrect Long Houchen. They would either live together or die side by side. Her heart finally felt relieved at this realization. So a thing such as real love really exists in the human world. Elux's aged face displayed a bitter smile. Although that was body just a condensed soul, he suddenly seemed to look much older at once. Of course it does. Long Houchen raised his head, ardently looking at Elux. He still did not have the slightest good opinion of Elux. This slaughterer was the one to cause the collapse of Shimordalu, the great loss in power of humanity. If not for him, how could the Dark Age even have come to be? If not for him, perhaps everything would be different. As the sign of light and candidate chosen by the goddess of light, all he caused was destruction along his way. Long Houchen still remembered the deep impression the helpless testimony of the divine snail of sun and moon had made on him at that time. Elux could not avoid seeing the look of rejection in Long Houchen's eyes, and he calmly declared, "Long Houchen, you have a chance to choose now. Compared to her, you are the most fitting to inherit my power. I can see that you have already formally become the one blessed by the goddess of light, so you must despise someone who has walked in the path of death and darkness like me. But now, you have no other choice than to rely on me to come back to life. On one side is your beloved girl, and on the other side, your conviction. Now is the time to make your choice. By choosing to inherit my power, you will be able to stay by her side, and the two of you will be able to live together. And you will become even stronger. If you choose to renounce this, you will die, and surely she will follow you soon. It's up to you." Long Houchen became blank-faced, and Kia too. They did not expect Elux to give Long Houchen such a choice to make at such a time. "Are you saying that? That even without my heart, you can help bring him back to life?" Kia asked in great joy. Elux responded proudly, "I am the almighty holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux. In this world, the things that I cannot accomplish are very scarce. Your soul is still present, so what's the deal with reconstituting your body? But why would I help reviving him? Unless he consents to inherit my power and becomes the next necromancer lord, you are free to live or die as you wish. You will see him die, and whatever you choose is none of my concern. At worst I just have to enter several thousands more years of deep slumber awaiting a next successor's arrival." Kia instantly turned her head to look at Long Houchen. But the instant her pretty eyes caught sight of Long Houchen, the flames of joy in her were extinguished entirely in one instant. Right? Inheriting from Elux would be the only way to resurrect him, but Houchen was the one chosen by the goddess of light, the scion of light. How could he accept inheriting Elux's power? Elux was the enemy of mankind, a terrible sinner, the slumbering calamity. If Long Houchen were to inherit his power, would that befit the scion of light? That would be like renouncing his whole beliefs. Kia was totally unable to speak a word. This being the man she loved deeply, how could she bear to tell him to renounce his beliefs? Kia understood clearly that these beliefs were as important as his life in his eyes. He was a knight, a pure knight to the core. Telling him to renounce his beliefs was no different than telling him to die. She didn't speak a word, tears flowing from Kia's eyes again. Stretching her hands forward, she wrapped them around Long Houchen's chest, sticking tightly close to him. She was already unwilling to think of anything, and just wanted to let him make his choice. If he chooses death, then let the two of them share this fate. This instant, Caio suddenly felt very tired, and only wanted to hold him. No matter whether they lived or died, they would stay that way forever. The dull feelings in Long Houchen's eyes disappeared gradually. Lowering his head, he looked at Kia leaning on his chest, his eyes flickering in the light, but it seems that no conflicting emotions were in him. An insipid smile started to form from the corners of his mouth, as Long Houchen raised his head, and looked calmly at Elux. "Have you made your decision?" Elux looked at him with some stupor, originally thinking that he would be in an incomparable struggle. But he didn't expect him to have such a look on his face so rapidly. This clearly meant that he had already made his decision. Long Houchen calmly answered, "I am willing to accept your inheritance, Sito, live on." Hearing his declaration, both Elux and Kia were suddenly shocked. Kia raised her head suddenly, looking at him in disbelief. "Houchen, you?" Elux reacted with great unbelief. "You are not even afraid of death, yet want to renounce your beliefs? Don't tell me that you have already forgotten that you are the Scion of Light, the one chosen by the Goddess of Light. Long Houchen raised his hand, lightly caressing Kia's long hair. I am willing to die for her, as well as I am willing to live for her sake. At this point, he paused slightly, his eyes looking dazzling at the time he turned toward Elux again. For the sake of Kia, what's the deal with renouncing my principles? Two explosions occurred almost simultaneously. One was in Kia's brain, feeling totally empty, as if she had already lost all her ability to think. And the other explosion occurred in the holy necromancer, or more accurately speaking, his condensed soul body. The terrifying explosion caused massive fluctuations of soul force, blasting Long Houchen and Kia away. Elux lifted his head, shrieking in pain, and his entire soul body trembling violently. Large amounts of death energy were spurted out from his soul, and even more pure holy fire of white color had appeared, igniting his soul, and spreading to every corner of his sui. Long Houchen hugged Kia tightly, using his own body to shield her from the assault of the terrifying soul force. Elux's soul force was just too powerful, even the demon god emperor would be almost unable to compare in this aspect. In front of the terrifying soul might, he was unable to even struggle. The terrifying spiritual waves persisted for a whole quarter of an hour before gradually pacifying. No. This can't be. How could such feelings exist between humans? Humans are supposed to be vulgar and shameless, disregarding anything in front of benefit. Why would you have such feelings, just why? Elux howled in hysteria. Right now he seemed like a wounded wolf, completely turning mad. No soul attack came. Long Houchen was drawing close to Kia, who noticed that right now Long Houchen was full of incomprehension. He had just consented to inherit Elux, so why would this holy necromancer make such a fuss? Elux kept yelling all along so far, but Long Houchen could feel that the aura of death in the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity was disappearing at an astonishing speed. This place, originally full of dense light essence, gradually regained its sacred feel. This madness lasted for the time of a meal, before Elux gradually calmed down. Although he was just a soul with a body, it took him large gasps to breathe, and his body was at least half its previous volume. But it had become pure white. Right now his soul seemed ignited to burn strongly, and the soul fire pulsing in his eyes gradually pacified as well. Unexpected, what an unexpected thing! Elux's voice clearly became stiff, and although his emotions had settled down, his feeling of incomprehension was still present. Long Houchen looked at him without understanding. Senior, you can let me inherit your power. Elux shook his head, replying in distress, No, I am not qualified. I was mistaken. I didn't expect myself to really be so mistaken. I was mistaken for several thousand years. He shook his head vigorously, full of pain. Kia held Long Houchen's hand. Right now her mind was empty, filled up with Long Houchen's figure. She warmly stood by his side, all traces of her original coldness totally vanished. The haze from her youth's traumas were all swept clean, leaving no traces behind. If one were to ask her why, surely she would reply that it's the power of love. Right, Houchen showed her his abiding love, willing to renounce his convictions for the sake of love. This caused a sublimation of Kia's soul, as all negative feelings in her were swept clean at that very moment. Nothing else mattered in that life where this fulfilling love existed. Elux raised his head, his ardent look faced toward this pair of sweethearts. His warm expression contained an unspoken admiration, but no traces of jealousy. Willing to hear my story? That's a story from 6,800 years ago. Elux's voice changed to contain a dense sadness which came out all around him. For some reason, Long Houchen felt thin surges of sympathy when looking at him, and nodded unconsciously. Elux calmly declared, 6,890 years ago, I was born in a city from the Pombo Empire on the northwest of the continent. This city was called Sidi. My father was the Lord of Sidi, a hereditary earl, and I was his only son. From the day of my birth, I lived in nobility. For the sake of letting me succeed his position as earl in the future, he arranged the best teachers to teach me knowledge and etiquette. The year of my 6th birthday, my great affinity with light essence was found out. I was blessed with a constitution of a scion of light. Although nearly 7,000 years have passed since then, I still remember very well the great joy father had at the time. He held me in his arms, and shouted in excitement through the whole hall, Elux, you are my pride. From that point, I became a light mage. My cultivation was extremely fast, shocking every teacher, and during the year of my 11th birthday, I had already become a mage of the 4th step. And at 13, the 5th step, then at merely 15 years old, I became the youngest mage of the 6th step to have ever appeared in the continent. At this point Long Houchen was also shocked, because, despite being a scion of light too, he had yet to reach the 6th step when he was 15 years old. In other words, Elux was even more outstanding than him at the same age of 15 years old. Father said that I was shockingly talented. Therefore, he personally brought me to participate in the talent war organized at that time between the three empires by the Glorious Church, where only youngsters below 20 were allowed to participate. Right, does the Glorious Church still exist at present? Have they yet taken over the whole continent? Long Houchen shook his head. No, at the time of the start of the Dark Age 6,000 years ago, the Glorious Church was annihilated by demonkind. Annihilated? Elux became blank, and immediately made the strange statement, "Great, great. I knew that they would one day walk this path." So, what was I saying again? Talents War. Kia reminded him. Right, the Talents War. I was without doubt the focus of this whole Talents War. The enemies that came out in front of me rarely resisted for over a minute. When I was young, I was also on par with your looks. Uncountable young ladies from the three empires gave me coquettish looks, and, during the finals, my opponent was the Princess Fulur of the Empire. She was also a genius, a powerful summoner. With the royal family's backing, she already had a purple Thunderstar Dragon Emperor as her contracted beast. Although her cultivation was below mine, her endless successions of summons were tough to face. That battle had lasted for a whole half of an hour, and in the end, because of her insufficient spiritual energy, she lost by my hand. I thereby became the final champion, and our Pombo Empire became the great winner. No matter how many years had passed since then, Elux looked extremely proud as he recounted these facts, making clear how impressive that feat used to be. At that time, humankind was still ruling over the whole Shimordalu, and the total human population was perhaps 10 times more than nowadays. This talent war was undoubtedly a stage for the youngest elites, so the achievement of that victory was truly a great glory. The Pope of the Glorious Church from that time rewarded me personally with a direct title of Viscount, and a feudal fiefdom of 50 kilometers. My reward was a great item, later known as equipment of epic tier. The me of that time was quite pleased with himself, having become the most glorious youngster of all continent. Even the Pope's son Palo was nothing in front of me. Also, that saying, a friendship may arise from an exchange of blows is true. That battle with Princess Fulo created a link between the two of us. From that day onwards, we were known as the two great seeds of the empire, on whom great hopes were placed. I was then transferred to the Royal Academy, pursuing my studies alongside Princess Fulo, and received all the support of the empire. Just by listening to his story, Long Houchen and Kia could feel how successful Elux was in his younger times. Receiving such glory at the age of 16 was not something just anyone could do. Elux's face started to fill with warmth. During the period of my studies in the Royal Academy, I was with Fulo training together and researching magic together all the time. Our feelings started to get deep between the two of us, and I deeply loved that beautiful genius. When the two of us were together, we were never short of topics to talk about. We made an oath of eternal love, engrossed with each other. The rise of these feelings did not only not adversely affect our cultivation, but instead made it faster and faster. In the year I turned 18 years old, I became a Grand Magic Tutor of the 8th step. Given my cultivation speed of that time, I was certain that I would surely be able to break through the 9th step at the age of 20, making me the youngest powerhouse of the 9th step in the whole continent. As time passed, the superiority of my talent became clearer and clearer. Although Fulo was also outstanding, in the end she was unable to compare with my gifts as Scion of Light. When I broke through the 8th step, she had just broken through the 7th. Back at that time, I could see that she was unhappy, but didn't put a lot of thought into the issue. I told her that I was willing to make a pause to wait for her to catch up with my cultivation. At the same time, I asked His Majesty her father for her hand, and he accepted a marriage between Fulo and me. Everything went smoothly. His Majesty was extremely pleased about our relationship, and the day I would break through the 9th step would be when we would marry. At that time, I was already acclaimed as the man most likely to rise to the level of God. The Pope of that time personally came to the empire, expressing the wish to take me as disciple and to take over his position in the future. For the sake of the empire, and for Fulo's sake, I refused. At that time, the church was extremely powerful in the continent, and in some manner, all three kingdoms had to listen to their orders. I could feel His Majesty's unwillingness, and for His Majesty's sake, I preferred to offend the church rather than leaving the empire. After reaching the 8th step, my great speed of cultivation visibly slowed down. My teachers in the Royal Academy told me that because I only kept cultivating all the time, I was lacking in other experiences, and suggested that I go to the outside world and gain experience, to discover all the miraculous places in the continent so that I would be able to progress while gaining in understanding. I followed their suggestion, and told Fulu about this matter, hoping to gain these experiences alongside her. But Fulu refused. Although she loved me deeply, she had an even greater eagerness to be number one. I knew that she was always looking to surpass me, but the gap between us only kept getting wider. So she chose to remain in the academy to keep training hard, looking to catch up to my cultivation. This video will end here.